That's all right.
There has to be content. We have to, we need stuff to get people like rumbling and grumbling. So whatever that means. Like so I guess compelling. Double down on whatever you want to double down on. And that there has to be content. We have to, we need stuff to get yeah, to double down on your things. All right, so I guess we're live. Here we are. Boom.
We are live. Wow! I am so happy because I'm a happiness coach, and we are not assuming a damn thing today. We don't have to assume. We see this is even in the four agreements. Don't assume. Do your best. Don't take things personal, but really assuming we're talking today. Do you assume when you walk up to somebody, you know what the heck they're thinking? You probably don't, because that's called mind reading. But what we're talking about today is in business. Are you assuming? Last week or something, somebody assumed Scott was doing certain things, but he wasn't. And but what we're talking about is assuming, and also contracts today. Throw something in, and we'll just
Well,
battle it
first of
out,
all,
buddy.
what's going on, guys? Normally we like,
Woo!
yeah, I know, right? Normally we like to go inside of the Facebook group and start, live streaming there. But I figured, YouTube was a larger platform, and I was like, oh, let's see what happens if we, stream to YouTube. So basically, guys, the whole point of this channel is to help educate people that have a service-based business. Jeff has a entertainment business, and I have a DJ business, and through I don't know, emotional intelligence, learning how to do sales, how marketing works, and being able to, work with your talent and then work with clients. A whole bunch of things are going on. And what we do here is basically just talk about the weekly and different stories that have come up, and hopefully you can retain that information and not make some of the same mistakes that Jeff and I have made. Now, today we're talking a little bit about ASSuME. So basically, even in sales or any conversation, don't assume that you know what the other person's end goals are. That's why we like to ask clarifying questions so that we can find out where they want to go and how, and if it works for us to meet together and take them there. And if you just start assuming and start throwing out all these equations, well, you're going to miss your mark because you haven't even stopped to find out what the other person and where their mindset is before you even get going. So I had a situation that had happened to me recently, and how would I word it? Basically, the person was talking to me like I wanted to be a certain goal or a certain way, and all of those equations that the person was using was missing their mark because they didn't even stop to ask me what I wanted to do, or even if what I have and what they have makes sense for us to move forward. Because just remember, when you're sitting down with somebody and you're interviewing them, it's an interview both ways, right? If they want your service or if you want them as a client. Now, uh, now when it comes to my system that I have set up, I have compliance steps, right? So they have to do certain things in order to book my service, right? So with that being said, that cuts out a lot of the headache people that you don't probably want to deal with anyway. Now, if you're just starting out and you want to, bend a little bit in order to pick up these people that don't want to follow your compliance steps, and if you want to learn more about compliance steps and the conveyor belt, got a whole class on www.coachscottking.com. Yet, when you do these things, that means that they want your service, and you're not just assuming. Like, if you put them on the right path and then they end up on a Zoom call with you, then I guess it would be pretty safe to say that this call was supposed to happen. And then of course you just ask a couple qualifying questions before you move forward, instead of just coming up to somebody assuming you know what they want and then trying to guide them down whatever your map of the world is. Now, for those of you that don't know what the map of the world is, basically, we don't experience reality. We experience reality through our mind's interpretation, through our, five senses. And everybody has their own map of what reality is. So if you try and place your map onto somebody else, I mean, that's like placing a frame onto somebody, and we have a whole class on frame control as well. And then you don't have to accept that. So if somebody puts a title on you and they say something like, "Oh, you're arrogant," and then if let's say you defend that, right? What are you defending? If you're not arrogant, but if you feel you are arrogant, then you would defend it. But if you, just kind of ignored that comment, then you would have nothing to do with offend. And it all goes back to assuming. They're assuming that their attacks on you will get you to bend. And that's one thing I've learned as I leveled up in conscious, right? Like the biggest thing that I had over me was a narcissist telling me what to do. And they would use all these different types of language patterns to get me to bend to their will. Now, you don't have to believe what the other person says. You can just because the other person says it doesn't mean it's true. It just means that they said it. Now, what I didn't realize is that I couldn't outwill somebody else's thinking. I thought I could outwork it and then just prove them wrong. But yet it's like, you cut off a hydra's head and then two more form. That's how a narcissist kind of works. And then I came into a certain situation like this where I have learned my lesson from before, and this other person assumes that I want to be a certain way. And well, I could sit there and break apart all these different equations and then tell them how they're wrong, or I could just back away and not have that at all, and then go spend my time with somebody who's worth spending my time with. Because if somebody in your life is just making things harder on you, just go find places where you're appreciated. And then, well, if you have obligations with this person, then just ride them out and then go find better things to do with your time, because we only have so much time on this planet, and you don't need to be spending it with somebody that doesn't make you feel good. I know that was a lot. Did
That
I
was
go? Was that
good.
too much circular?
No, you went around. That's good. Again, we're still talking about assuming and asking. That was a great example. And this is why we have contracts, because someone says this and it doesn't mean anything in legal terms. It doesn't matter if you do a verbal contract, because you can't prove it. You can't prove the verbal contract. But if you have a written one, then and you put everything in that contract. And what we've been coming across throughout our career, I've been doing it 40 years, is that people assume that they're getting a certain product, and you assume you're giving the product that you just said, but you guys are not on the same page. So contracts are really good to have for that, because you both can go back and say, this is what it said. And then they really can't come to you and say, you didn't say this. And what I also was telling Scott, what I do with my company is I tell them the regular price. So even if they're getting a discount price, I put the regular price on there. This was what we usually charge, and you're getting a discount because of whatever reason. And it could be a new buyer or a first time use or anything you want to put on there. But later on, when they come back to you and say, why are you charging me this? And say, well, it's our regular price. And then you don't have to explain it, but you can. You say, well, I have two people I have to hire for that. I'm going to have to pay them this amount, and they're going to have to do this extra work. And you're only giving me a certain amount of time. So, it's really good to have a contract so you don't have to fight that later on. And assuming either way, you're assuming you have a good client and they're assuming you have a good entertainer. We're both kind of an entertainment company. He puts out DJs and other things, and I put out in background entertainment for any kind of event. And what you want to be on the same page, especially like what you're getting paid and why. So those are two things you need to. Another thing, the best thing I've ever found in my contracts is I used to send out a contract that was a dead end contract. It said, I'm going to give you this for this, but it didn't have a time limit. Now on mine, and Scott's a little better on it than me for his company, he puts it like a 7 or 8 day you sign, or this deal is not going to maybe be recognized. I say 1 day. Because what I have is they're putting on your people on hold. I put out entertainers, and if they say a specific entertainer, they're on hold until that contract is not signed or signed. But if you don't put an end date, so it says if you don't sign in 1 day that we're doing this, then we have the right not to serve you. Now, that's the best advice I've ever given it to anyone, because they used to hold my people hostage until they could find somebody cheaper, or they would take my contract, put it to somebody else's company, and said, well, can you beat this price? And so then you're just in a weird situation. So that's a good thing about contracts. But we're back to assuming. Let's
Yeah.
start asking. Let's start asking. What do you mean by that? And that's or
Or how does that play out?
how does that play out? What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you want? That would have been the first question to ask. What?
Or here's what Chris Voss would say, and I actually used it. So for those of you that may not know, Chris Voss is the guy who talks people out of a federal out of bank robbers out of a building, right? And he doesn't do that anymore, but he did it for the FBI. And one of the most major things that I learned from him was that he uses something called implied empathy. So if somebody's giving you a hard time, and this is exactly what I used 2 days ago, and so there was a little bit of a misunderstanding between setting up a speaker for a private last dance, and one person was saying one thing and another person was saying another thing, and then I had somebody telling me that I had to now go ahead and put somebody in line. And when it comes to implied empathy, I used, well, how am I supposed to do that? And that's what Chris Voss does when he talks people out of a bank. Because and it goes a little bit like this. It's like, how am I supposed to do that? I have somebody who works for me and I make money with them, and I trust them. They've been with me for a very long time. And of course I have you telling me a different story. And how am I supposed to have this conversation with somebody? And now I have two different stories. So
That is
now
great.
so
It
it's
put,
implied empathy, and oh man, that stuffed that person so bad. Well, again, I have suspicions, assuming this person's a narcissist, and if I'm still collecting the dots to see if they all line up. Yet at the same time, if they do, I mean, I'm getting better at better at understanding where people are at. And so once if you ever stuff a narcissist, they will tend to turn on you. But at the same time, how does that play out? You don't want to attack somebody, so if you use implied empathy, I mean, then like, how is that supposed to happen? And then you put them in your shoes, and then the conversation changes.
that's a good.
Yeah.
That's very good. And
So
what would this be the same statement kind of Scott would uh, could you put yourself in my shoes for a second? I have this happening over here and you here.
yeah,
I want a win-win situation. I do. I want
yeah,
a win-win situation. So what would you suggest I do?
yeah, and that's
Because
what I
we put it
did.
back on their court, right?
Well, I don't think this person's ever been talked to like that before because they didn't know how to handle it. They were like, "What?" And then they said, "Well, this isn't how I expected this conversation to go." And
That's
I'm
how
like,
we go ahead.
okay, so as a talent agent, I will defend my talent to the death because, I mean, if they say something and I have a rapport with them, and then I feel that they're saying the right thing or what's coming from the heart, I'll just go to the death for them. So that's kind of like where I was put. And well, I'm not going to be disrespectful to somebody, right? So it's kind of like, well, how does that play out? And then I don't think this person ever been talked to like that before, and that kind of flustered him, and then the conversation went a different direction. But again, if you want to learn all these language patterns and what they mean, we have a whole class online, and you could moonwalk your way pretty much on anything. With enough practice of how this works out. Basically, we have a whole class online. Sleight of mouth is 16 different ways to look at something, um, and be able to come out. I mean, when you look at an argument, or if you look at a conversation, or if you look at an interaction, what does a win mean, right? Do you really want to beat the other person and put a chess move on them, or would it be better just to dodge a swing? It's up to you where you want the end result to be. Me personally, for this situation, I think I'd rather just dodge a swing, because I know, and I have suspicions, assuming this person's a narcissist, and I know narcissists, once they turn on you, you're the enemy. They'll love you, you hold your boundaries, they don't understand why you're holding your boundaries, and then you become the bad guy while you explain to them why you're holding your boundaries. And that, I would say, is expert level sleight of mouth, in order to keep face. Like this is like almost like mafia without death involved, almost like mafia type, language patterns.
Well, what we want at the end of the
Well,
day.
again, I studied Michael Franchise too.
So what we want at the end of the day, don't assume something from somebody else. Get a contract.
Yeah.
Make sure it's in the contract. The one thing it's hard to do in any situation, even probably for yourself, you sign up. You sign up to get a phone, or you sign up, even a TV service or internet or anything. You sign up and you get a price, but then they're going to raise the price. They say, well, no matter what, it's like, well, things have changed. Now we're more expensive, more of this. But if they don't have it in writing why that happened, you're kind of like, I'll just go somewhere else. I don't want to do that. So watch your contracts. That came out a little wrong there. It's like, but assuming we're going on assuming and keeping contracts, and what do you want, and are they on the same page? So what we want out of all of this at the end is a win-win situation where you can talk to your client and say, just like he did, said, well, what do you want? I mean, what can we do about it? I mean, I can't lose. This is not an option to hurt my entertainment, and I don't want to hurt you either. What's your win-win situation? That's all I do. And if it's not a win-win situation, then maybe we're not the right client.
It's like
So
asking good qualifying questions before engaging into whatever the end result is. Now, you'd want to find out if the end result is similar to what you want, and then go from there moving forward and together rather than pointing fingers. And you know, that's another thing too. Like I talk to people, and if they're not living this world, they think they do, right? Is that go like it goes back to the Dunning-Kruger effect, you know, people that know a little bit but want to, think they're experts on it type thing, but people that know a lot know they know enough to ask more questions, or know that they don't think they know anything because they know so much. They're like, oh my God, I know there's so many more ways this could go, but somebody has a little bit of information, then they think they know it all, right? Confidence versus competence. So it's important to be mindful of that as well. Just because somebody is saying all these different things, it could be leading you down paths, and then, well, that person didn't really know what they were talking about, right? And I write about this in my book as well. I want to make sure that I take lessons from people that have done what I'm looking to do. If they haven't done what I'm looking to do, then I don't really want to hear what they have to say, unless it's like being impolite or something, but it's one ear out the other. Like, being a millionaire is like one of the goals that I want to do, and I want to do it with internet marketing. So I want to listen to people that know how to make $1 million in internet marketing, which is why I'm flying San Diego on Friday to take more classes to learn more about how internet marketing works and how sales of one to many works, because that's how you jump from where I'm at, which I won't say I've mastered one to one. Yeah, I've got some pretty good levels up and can prove my numbers and stuff that I know one to one sales pretty well. Yet jumping from one to many is a different animal. So anyway, you wouldn't want to assume that you knew all these things until you've actually done it. That kind of thing. And when you're having a conversation, even with sales or with anybody in front of you, we have a thing in hypnosis, right? And we always ask. They could say something to you like, my mom died. We wouldn't empathize with that unless needed. But the first question would be, well, how do you feel? Like, how does that make you feel? All right. What does that mean? Right. They can say, oh, I'm working so hard. I'm doing all these different things. Okay. Well, we wouldn't assume anything. We'd be like, oh, how does that make you feel? Maybe somebody who works hard or does all these things needs their mind busy and they're happy because they have a lot of work coming in. Or it could be the other way, where they say something like, oh yeah, this is too much. I can't handle all this stuff. And why is it so bad? Okay. Well, these are two different people doing saying the same statement. So then now you know what the goal is. And then how do we cut back from working so hard for the one who's overworked? And then the other person who likes to be busy, you would just say, well, well, good for you. I'm glad you got there. Right. So you would want to know these things, qualifying questions before engaging. And then that's another thing too. Do you really want to join in on a pity party? So if somebody who's complaining about something and then you encourage that behavior, it's only going to get worse, right? That's another thing as you level up in consciousness, right? Or I've had to say goodbye to some of my, childhood friends because they would want me to join in on a pity party. And then, yeah, all this life is so bad. Well, you're doing it to yourself. Like, how can we, I understand you're here. Well, how can it be better? And I don't just assume that you want to make it better. Or maybe somebody likes to have that pity party because it makes them whole. And then again, you have to ask all these questions if you want to find out where the right path is to go. So if somebody starts coming to you and starts barking all these orders and stuff, and they don't know where you want to be, and probably family's the worst for this, right? They probably put all these things on you for years, right? And they just think that you know where you're going, or already assume that they know what your goals are. Like, so again, don't assume. Ask questions before you can move forward, or even decide whether or not it's a good relationship to continue with.
Let's throw in mind reading there a second,
Yeah,
because
sure.
so mind reading is when you believe you think you know what somebody else is thinking. And then this is, I want to go with two things. What he had just mentioned earlier before, your map of the world. Remember, the map of the world is basically everything you went through all your life, and it made you who you are. Every decision, everything, and you see the world through your eyes. You actually have different beliefs, different sound. Just everything is different. And when somebody talks to you, sometimes you think you know what they're thinking, and more than likely you don't. More than likely you don't. That's when the assuming comes in. I assume I know what you mean, but so, and also, and if he was saying dealing with your family. Here's the best and the perfect thing to always say for that. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? What do you mean? What do you mean?
Yeah,
And
just keep
and then
going.
they have to tell you what do you mean. And what Scott and I early on years ago, we'd say, "How's that working for you?" It was our catchphrase every time we talk. We've been doing this 3 or 4 years. So if you want to go back years, we've been doing this. You could learn almost how to run your company without hardly anything. So we've been talking about company and everything, and how to become a better person, how to be happier, because I'm usually the happiness guy, happy, happy, happy. And, Scott's the business guy. And we've been working a long time, and I'm going to be that millionaire in just a few years, where I'll have at least $1 million in the bank with all my other stuff, not content. I mean, not counting any of my business stuff. So I'm almost there. And so we both have that goal. We'll get that. And then, back to assuming. Don't
Anyway.
assume. Just we're back.
All
Okay.
right. So there you go. I think that'll pretty
Yeah,
much wrap
that's
us up.
today. Yeah. Thank you, man.
All right, guys. So once again, www.coachguyking.com. We got Tharpo